So today we're going to be covering the sequel to Night at the Creation Museum, a film created by Eric Hovind and in partnership with Answers in Genesis. The sequel is called Night at the Ark Encounter. Now, given that this is supposed to be a parody of Night at the Museum, you would think that that would just be called Night at the Creation Museum 2 Battle of the Ark Encounter, in keeping with the lore of Night at the Museum. But that is not what they chose to do. They chose to call it Night at the Ark Encounter, which is kind of emblematic of the nonsensical marketing and targeting that they're actually trying to do, because while the kids today would not understand that Night at the Creation Museum is sort of a jokey satire of Night at the Museum 2006 movie, because none of them were alive in 2006, they really won't understand Night at the Ark Encounter. Here's where the lot of you are already steaming your fingers away, just leaving blood across the keyboard, typing, Erica Gutsick Gibbon, why would you do this to yourself? This is self-flagellation. And I imagine that a lot of those commenters already previously consumed Night at the Creation Museum, didn't you? Alas, they have become like us. They have eaten from the tree of the knowledge of cringe. Of course, you couldn't ask for a better lol cow to milk cringe from than Young Earth creationism, which is consistently putting out recycled arguments that were, debunked 20, 40, 60 years ago. We are but simple cringe addicts, hungering for the next fix. Fortunately, this particular brand of cringe content, Young Earth creationism, also offers an impeccable opportunity to, of course, debunk pseudoscience, which is one of my favorite things to do. As you probably know, if you're here on this channel, we like to systematically deconstruct incorrect science and misinformation, and hopefully give the opportunity to folks who may have previously consumed that content an opportunity to see why it's incorrect. So what do you get when you mix the aggressively unfunny with the criminally incorrect? Well, you get Night at the Ark Encounter, and you get what you deserve.
See how the surf hits the ground, and they give it all they've got, and they give it all they've got, and you give it all you've got, till you're down. See how the brain can fall inside a hole you couldn't see. You fall inside a hole inside of someone. Help me understand what's going on inside my mind. Doctor, I can't tell if I'm not
Eric starts with one of these, trying to scare us into not covering his cinematic experience, but hate to break it to you, Eric, we got fair use, baby. Then we get another one of Eric's flashy openers. The music's not as good as the Night at the Creation Museum version. It's fine, I'm over it. And he drives up in his Camaro to his job, watching the Ark Encounter this time.
Hey, Ricky. Hey, man, how was school? Oh, good. Hey, with this new job, I might get to hang out every single weekend.
So that's Eric Hovind's character talking to his semi-estranged son, Ricky, in case you missed the lore of the first Night at the Creation Museum. And I think the moral that's being set up here is working at the Creation Museum equals making up all the trauma that you inflicted on your child.
Yeah, it's garden museums or something. Whoa! They've got me guarding Noah's Ark. Ha! We gotta come check this out sometime, man. This is awesome.
When I was at the Ark Encounter, one thing that you really feel that they're trying to impress on you is that the Ark is big. It is a big boat. And I feel, and I know others have felt, that there is a compensation joke to be made there.
Ooh, that's kind of small. Yikes.
Eric is marveling about how large this boat truly is, wanders into the gift shop, meets a lady named Gabby, and Gabby points him in the direction of everyone's favorite character. That's right, it's Tim Schaffy, an apologist, here to give us another tremendously stilted performance that could only be rivaled by a circus performer on actual real stilts.
Derek, hey, good to see you again. You survived.
I did, man.
The level of low effort here is astounding because I watched Night at the Creation Museum, and I know that at the end of Night at the Creation Museum, Tim Schaffy's character walked Eric Hoven's character, out of the museum. He knows he survived. We've already established this. 2 movies, each less than 30 minutes, and they can't even keep their own lore straight for that long.
Can I call you Gigantor?
Sure, dum-dum.
Oh, got me.
Yeah.
Such bullshit. And plays the music. I just can't. I need a drink. And a Xanax.
It's gonna be like this the whole time. You know that, right? It's gonna be like this again the whole time. Most of the jokes are Night at the Museum references. And like, I hate to be a stickler, but they're not even from Night at the Museum 2 Battle of the Smithsonian, alright? They're not even from the second movie. It's just a rehash of jokes from the first movie.
Yeah, this place is amazing.
It is, you know, it goes up 3 stories from here.
Wow, I'm gonna have a lot of fun exploring this place tonight.
You're gonna get your steps in too. Why don't we go have a look around?
Yeah, let's do it.
The boat is big.
No way.
Pretty big, isn't it?
Yes, it is a big boat, very large, quite impressive. I'll save you the torture of listening to Tim Schaffy and Eric Hoven discuss how most people have a massive misconception about what young Earth creationists think actually happened in the flood, and that it isn't a 900-year-old man building a giant boat by himself, but actually a 500-year-old man. And he might have hired a primitive construction crew to help him build it.
Still sounds kind of outrageous to me.
Then Tim Schaffy quizzes Eric like he's a child about the Genesis 1:1 story and about how all kinds of death came into the world because Adam and Eve ate the cosmic fruit.
Remember Adam and Eve?
Oh, the naked people, yeah.
Well, they were for a time, right?
Okay.
What happened?
Sin.
So, 1, no, humans can't live much past 120. A paper came out this year that suggested that even if we put our best foot forward on this and really lean into the anti-aging genetic therapy and things like that, it's not going to help too much. It's just the nature of our telomeres and the nature of being an organic organism. And 2, this idea that all organic death was brought into the world due to Adam and Eve eating of the cosmic fruit incident, as it were. This is something that cannot happen. First of all, it's not supported theologically that all organic death was instigated by the events of Genesis 1:1, but also there isn't really any clarity on what organic death actually encompasses. Did cells die in the garden? Did plants die? Did arthropods? We don't really know, and that's because that detail was not provided to us by the authors, because it's not meant to be a literal story. Again, you can find the details of that in the video linked in the description.
So you really think this happened?
Of course it did. This is in the Grand Canyon. These are bent rock layers. You see these?
Yeah.
No. Is it easy to bend rock?
No. It
That's right.
breaks.
It breaks. So how can you explain this over billions of years? If each of these were laid down slowly and gradually over long periods of time and they're hardened, and then this upwarp occurs, what would happen to all those rocks?
Break.
They would break, and you don't see that. So how can we explain that? Well, the worldwide flood would lay down all these layers very rapidly, and while they're still soft, you get this upwarp that bends all of these, and they're not broken.
So those folds in the rock, in geologic terminology, are known as anticlines and synclines. These types of formations are created when rock is exposed to massive amounts of heat and pressure over long periods of time. It's abjectly not the result of a global flood. And you might be thinking, that's great, how do we know this? And we know this because 1, we've done lab experiments to see how rock reacts to massive amounts of heat and pressure, but more importantly, There are actively growing clines of both the Syn and Anti variety right now, and we're observing them doing their thing as a result of heat and pressure. Additionally, the diagnostic characteristics that are found and used to identify rock that is bent in that fashion due to something like a flood are drastically different than the diagnostic characteristics used to identify folding as a result of heat and pressure. Bent layers that result from small local flooding tend to have little boundary strata that have this milky color to it, while folds that result from heat and pressure tend to have microfractures or large-scale fractures. What we see at the Grand Canyon, again, is definitively the latter. Of course, they don't show you the cracked portions of this bent rock, because that would be destructive to the narrative, wouldn't it? Chaffee muses that these kinds of folds are found all over the world, as if that kind of supports his idea of a global flood. But again, the problem is they are found all over the world, with the diagnostic characteristics of classic tectonic heat and pressure foldings.
This is just one of the many evidences for the worldwide flood.
I didn't see any of those when I was there. Before leaving, Tim Chaffee warns Eric Hovind, that he doesn't need to be falling asleep again this time, and that he needs to make sure that he stays awake and actually does his job.
Oh, and Derek,
Yeah.
don't fall asleep.
Oh, don't worry, I won't.
Next, Eric pads the runtime by walking around the Ark and shining his flashlight at things. And then this happens. What if they just ended the film there, right? The credits start rolling and and Eric's like, this is my art house arc. But no, Eric does indeed get up, and just like last time with the Creation Museum, but not really, things have kind of come alive, but in like a low-budget kind of way. Unironically, the next part, I think, is the most well done of the entire two films. Eric starts being on the real Noah's Ark, right? He's woken up, he's on the real Noah's Ark, and the boat is swaying, right? So that he himself is getting tossed from side to side as the boat is like hitting the waves or whatever. They do this really creative shot where they're kind of tilting the camera and Eric is, moving. I mean, he's running, right? But he's doing a pretty good job selling the idea that he's feeling the movement. I just wanted to say it was creative, and whoever came up with that idea, whether it was Eric himself or someone else, really good job.
Derek.
It's me! Again, bitch! Hello, you damn right!
The thing is, when Eric is on screen, it's goofy and cringe, but it is kind of funny, right? When Tim is on screen, it's cringe and also just wrong, and potentially in like a malicious and intentional way. When Tim shows up, we're always about to get some kind of soft lecture. When Eric is there, hijinks are about to ensue. So when I see Tim, my Pavlovian response is to dry heave.
Do you know what's happening?
I don't know, man. This is really freaking me out.
It's the flood. At the beginning of the flood, the fountains of the Great Deep broke open, ripping apart the original continent. The water levels rose globally. Tsunamis battered the land, ripping apart the land and dragging it into the sea. During that initial 40 days and 40 nights of torrential rain, creatures from all around the globe were being drowned in the flood waters. The waters covered the mountains to a depth of 15 cubits, about 22 feet. Huge chunks of that land that had been ripped apart are now colliding underwater, creating some of our mountain ranges. 5 months after the start of the flood, the Ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. About 2 months later, the mountaintops became visible. Then, approximately 1 year after the flood began, the earth was dry enough for the animals to be released from the Ark.
So, that's like a cool story and everything, but there are a few major issues that I hope should be quite glaring to you. Again, this is a rehash of things that we've covered already before in the Ark Encounter and Creation Museum video, but I think it's always worth noting that that little section about breaking apart from the original continent, he's talking about Rodinia, not Pangaea. There's a plaque about that in the Creation Museum. So, in order to explain the geology that we have, they actually have to get the continents to move from Rodinia to Pangaea, and then to their current positions. If they have roughly a year to do that, and that's pretty generous because it seems like from what Chaffee just said that they're working with significantly less time since the boat rests on top of the mountain at like 5 months, then the continents are going to be moving like faster than a literal race car speed, right, as they zoom about on the surface of the mantle. That's bad for a few reasons. One, there is no mechanism for actually giving us that movement, right? The way that we know how the continents move atop the mantle has to do with a concept called convection, or convection cells. Essentially, material in the mantle is heated rock, and as the rock heats, it rises to the surface. Similarly, as surface rock cools, it sinks. And what ends up happening is as the sinking rock gets closer to the core, it heats up and begins to rise again, and as the heated material comes to the surface, it begins to cool again. And you end up with the cycle, as material rises and falls within the mantle, creating a convection cell. This moves the continents atop the mantle. We don't have anything that can induce that at race car speeds, and worse yet, that creates a lot of friction. Combining all of the heat from all of that friction, along with all of that accelerated nuclear decay that they tend to bring up, and you're getting, under the CPT model, or that catastrophic plate tectonics model that Tim Chaffee espouses at Answers in Genesis, you're going to vaporize the granitic crust of the Earth a few dozen times over. This is, of course, something that they know is a problem, as they have mentioned it in their journals, and mentioned that they're still working on it. But working on it essentially involves and entails coming up with a brand new kind of physics, something I don't think the staff at Answers in Genesis is equipped to do. But I guess at least we got to look at Tim Chaffee pointing and gesturing at plaques. Then Eric asks how we could fit millions of species onto the Ark, and we get to move over to the immaculate kinds list.
We've done all the calculations. We figured out how much water they need, how much food they need.
But there's millions of species.
There are millions of species on Earth today, but let's think through this a little bit, okay?
Don't threaten me with a good time, Tim.
Whales, dolphins, fish, where do they live? Where do they live?
In the water.
That's right. During a flood, do you think they have to be on board the Ark?
Got me there. All right.
So remember how I said there's a pretty substantial heat problem? I'm going to put a link in the description so you can see just the specific numbers that are going to vaporize the granitic crust of the Earth. Well, that level of heat certainly will make the ocean a bit balmy for some of our aquatic and marine life, would it not? But there's a bigger problem at hand. I know, there always is. And that's salinity. I've talked about this before on the channel, but the nature of salinity is that organisms are pretty fine-tuned to it. Some organisms that live in like brackish waters and deltas tend to have a little higher tolerance for either higher or lower salinity, but like if you put a freshwater fish into the ocean, it's going to die very quickly. And if you put a saltwater fish into the freshwater, into a lake, then it's going to die fairly quickly too. So, if we're looking at a global flood, at the end of it, you're either going to have only saltwater or only freshwater organisms, or only organisms that can tolerate a brackish mix. We shouldn't have any organisms that have a specific salinity preference alive to today. So you might be thinking, okay, what about the mammals? Well, again, refer back to the whole oceans are boiling off several times over in response to the granitic crust vaporizing kind of situation. Many of the largest cetaceans we know of are filter-feeding animals. They are members of Mysticidae. That means that they eat things like plankton and krill. itty-bitty critters that are highly sensitive to things like salinity and temperature. So those guys are extinct instantly because their food source is gone in the first 10 minutes of the flood. But to make matters equally as bad, your members of Odontoceti, the toothed whales who eat bigger things like fish and giant squid, rely on animals that are smaller than themselves, who of course rely on animals that are smaller than themselves, etc., all the way down, again, to the plankton and the krill, which are gone in the first 10 minutes. So yes, unfortunately, all your marine creatures, including dolphins, whales, and assorted fish, but also things like mollusks, they're all extinct. You might be thinking, hey, I feel like I remember seeing something about how salinity can stratify. You can have big sections of the water that are mostly high in salinity and others that are mostly freshwater. This is not something that can happen. There is a hypothetical version of it called a salt wedge estuary, and it is exclusively in relation to a very small patch of water right outside where rivers dump into the sea. This is not something that is feasible in the slightest.
There are millions of species of insects. Do they have to be on board the Ark?
Well, even if they were, I mean, it's a big place. They wouldn't take up a whole lot of room.
Yeah, but they are not required on board the Ark because they can survive a flood, and they don't fit the description given in the Bible of the creatures that need to be on board the Ark.
For the bugs, I'm going to play a little bit from my Ark Encounter video that I think sums it up nicely. There's a nice placard that details why arthropods were probably not taken on the Ark, but don't worry, if they did, there was room because arthropods are small. I wonder what the Arthropleura kennel looked like, or if Eurypterids were on the Ark. The reason they proposed that arthropods were excluded from being taken aboard is that God wanted all animals with the breath of life in their nostrils aboard, which meant that book lungs and spiracles disqualified the arthropods from getting a ticket. No worries again, though, the arthropods are proposed to have survived on floating debris. Please do not think hard about that.
How about microorganisms and bacteria, those things?
They certainly wouldn't take up a lot of room.
No, maybe they could all fit inside of a thimble, but they're always included in the list of the millions of species.
Tim is showing his non-biology or biology-adjacent background here because bacteria are not animals, which means they wouldn't be included in that list of around 8.7 million species that we know of just living today. But honestly, that's okay, because the way that they group animals is entirely arbitrary. I'm not joking. It is 100% completely arbitrary.
So how many animals would have been on the Ark?
They only needed a total of 1,400 kinds, fewer than 7,000 animals total.
What?
What?
Yes, Eric, what indeed?
Yeah, you're mentioning species over and over again, but the Bible talks about kinds. So think about this. Dogs, okay? You got wolves, coyotes, dingoes. What are they?
Dogs.
Yeah, but they're different species. They're just dogs. He just needs 2 members of the dog kind.
Those of you who have been in the young Earth creationist racket for quite some time probably involuntarily gag when you hear the word kinds. Oftentimes, people who debate or talk to young Earth creationists tend to say creationists have no idea what kinds are. It's just this very arbitrary category. And it is arbitrary, but they know exactly what a kind is and how it's meant to function. A kind is meant to be something that appeals to the common sense of whoever's looking at it. Look at all the members of Canidae. Dogs, dingoes, wolves, they all are dog-like, and so it makes sense that they would be members of the dog kind. The problem is, when you push them, they tend to give a definition that roughly equates to, if it can hybridize, it's a member of the same kind. But foxes are members of Canidae, and they cannot hybridize or produce any kind of offspring with wolves, dogs, or coyotes, or dingoes for that matter. They have the same problem with bears or ursids, members of the Ursidae family or bear kind. Pandas cannot procreate with brown bears or polar bears or black bears. And it's quite interesting because if you can get a gander at this kinds list, as I did, and meticulously wrote down into an Excel spreadsheet whose link you can find in the description, you'll see that they're much more specific about their kinds when the animal is small. When the animal is large, the kinds tend to be much broader. For example, they have a lot of kinds at the genus level in amphibians, because amphibians tend to be smaller, at least in the extant species. Of course, they don't care about things like temnospondyls or anything like that. But once we reach the larger scale organisms, it's always at the family level. I'm going to play another excerpt from my Ark Encounter video because it's relevant. And we recycle here. This is a green channel. We recycle our content. Genetics certainly doesn't come into play when differentiating the kinds, as once again, humans and chimpanzees are kept separate despite a 98.8% similarity, while felids, elephantids, and murids are all within single kinds despite their broad range of genetic similarity. But morphology doesn't seem to matter very much either, as arbitrary distinctions appear to be made in order to separate long extinct groups. Let's appreciate how this is done in the context of my own field of primates. Extinct primates are split in a very strange way. Notharctus and Adapus are split into separate kinds, as are Proconsul and Epidium. In conventional science, these animals each have their own families and are placed in unique spots due to the metrics of their skulls. However, conventional science still holds that these animals are related. The Ark encounter, though, proposes that kinds are created groups, meaning Notharctus and Adapus are not related at all under their lens, and neither are Proconsul and Epidium. This is strange, as part of what helps conventional scientists group animals into families involves knowing how those families are in turn related. The extant kinds are arguably worse. Obviously, they can't have humans with the rest of the great apes, so instead of using conventional terms like hominoidea, they are dubbed pongids on this plaque and separated from the humans. But it seems strange to lump the great apes and then separate lemurs from indrids. Even stranger is to lump all of the cercopithecids together, from talapoins to mandrills, but separate the cebids from the attalids. Again, they think that no kind is related to another kind, so gibbons or hylobatids are not at all related to the other apes in their view. So as you can see, it's not going very well for the extant animals, and it doesn't go very well for the dinosaurs either.
This is amazing. Oh, wait a minute. Dinosaurs? Are you telling me dinosaurs were on the Ark?
Of course dinosaurs were in the Ark. They were land animals. They were made on day 6, the same day that God made man.
Wow.
So this is a sauropod dinosaur.
Oh, the big ones.
Yeah, they were huge, except when they weren't.
Oh.
When they were young. They were a lot smaller.
Got them on the Ark.
Of course. You know, it makes a lot of sense to bring the younger ones. They eat less, they have less weight, they have many more years to reproduce. That is Ham's wife.
Now that's a whole other question.
It's been argued that we find a new dinosaur species every week, which means this problem is only going to get worse, because that's just considering dinosaurs. What about things like the temnospondyls, the synapsids of the Permian? What about things that crept around in the Cambrian, or the organisms that ruled in the Devonian? And then there's the issue of feeding the critters, as I've covered in another video, same video I keep referencing, whose link is in the description. Let's consider for a moment the proboscideans, elephants, and their kin. According to the chart that they present at the Ark encounter, there are 10 proboscidean kinds, so there are 20 proboscideans on the Ark. Now, let's assume, as I've done in the past, the math that myself and Walker, who's collaborated with the channel, have done in the past, that these guys are working with a sleeping metabolism, the slowest possible metabolism. And let's assume that we're feeding them alfalfa, which is the highest possible energy density feed. That feed takes up over 60% of the space on the Ark in total volume. This is based solely on the numbers that Answers in Genesis provides for their Ark on their website, for 10 kinds out of their proposed 1,400. So to quickly summarize the kinds section, the kinds as categories are arbitrary. They don't matter, they have absolutely no methodology, rhyme, or reason to them, and are created solely out of convenience, hence why humans who are in the family Hominidae on the basis of genetics and morphology along with chimps and other apes aren't actually lumped within that group, but lions and tigers are both in Felidae, despite the fact that they are only 95% similar compared to the 98.8% seen in humans and chimps. In addition to this, they cannot possibly feed all of the animals, because the sheer volume that food would take up is simply too much for the Ark to handle. Next, Tim Chaffee talks with Eric about how Noah and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives could have survived on the Ark. I don't care about this. None of that matters. The problem is that all of the other data that we have covered so far doesn't just provide evidence against the Ark. It precludes it entirely. With the data that we have available, there is no way to make Noah's Ark work. Whether it's making it work in relation to the conditions outside, which would be the vaporizing granitic crust of the Earth and the boiling seas, or fitting all the organisms onto the Ark with categories that aren't real or feeding these animals. None of it works.
What do you think caused all of this?
Looks like water to me.
That's right, it's all erosional features. Do you know where this is found?
No.
Right here, on Mars.
Mars.
A planet with no known liquid water on the surface. Yet we see those erosion features, so it does look like there was some flooding there in the past, and many scientists think it was a huge flood there. Now we have all of those erosional features in much greater abundance and much larger scale right here on this planet. Our home.
Earth.
That's right. And do you think that maybe this has some water that could cause flooding?
How much of the Earth is covered by water?
70%. So why are so many unwilling to accept a major flood, a global flood here on Earth, but they're willing to accept one here on Mars? You know why?
I don't.
It shows their bias.
People don't think that there was a single massive global flood on Mars. In fact, I looked into it immediately after hearing this from Tim, and the very first article I saw discussed how it was local flooding with massive amounts of water for like very brief periods of time. That is perhaps a bit different than a global flood that lasts a full year, Tim. What are you thinking, ding dong? But thank you, Tim, for assuring me that creationists continue to do what they so frequently do, which is mangle the hard work of legitimate scientists in order to misrepresent it in a way that lends credence to something that never happened. I'm mean in this video, I gotta tell you, I'm mean in this one. Normally I'm not this mean. Tim, if you're watching this, normally I'm not this mean, but you could learn to act better. You could take a few cues from Eric. Eric, you're doing a really swell job, but you're still really wrong. Next, Tim starts reading from Genesis. Again, this feels like padding the length, although I can't say I haven't done the same thing once or twice. And he's doing this while showing some of the classic dioramas from the Ark Encounter, the one where there's like literal giants fighting dinosaurs in a coliseum. There's one where they're like a bunch of heathens are worshipping a baby to some kind of snake deity, and there's one that just looks kind of like an ancient rave. After this, Eric gets really scared.
So, I mean, the world was really bad. Wait a minute. The world today's pretty bad. Doesn't this world deserve to be judged again?
Things are pretty bad right now, what with the pandemic, negligence surrounding that, a lot of inaction with regard to climate change and exacerbation of it. And I don't know, I kind of feel like the answer to that isn't mass genocide. I think that maybe God should just kind of take it down a notch if that's what he's thinking.
So just chill out. You know, drink a 7-Up, eat a moon pie, quit murdering people.
It does. And he will judge it. But God provided the way for us to be saved from that judgment.
He did?
He did.
How?
Well, you gotta find Gabby. She'll show you what God did.
Who's Gabby?
She's here in the Ark. And if you don't find her, you'll never know.
Okay, I'll go find Gabby.
Tim tells Derek in this very weird sequence where Tim is implied to be, once again, an apparition. This is the form that he takes quite often in this universe, in this cinematic world. He informs Derek that the only way that he can be saved from this second judgment is by finding Gabby. Now, I don't know if this is me making the connection or if there is a through line here, but Gabby was the name of that woman that Derek saw in the gift shop, like at the very beginning of the movie.
Hi, I'm Gabrielle. Can I help you find something?
Derek Daly, the new night guard around here.
So Derek is sent on this strange cosmic fetch quest to find this woman. Hijinks ensue.
Hey there, Derek Daly, the new night guard. You wouldn't happen to know where I could find a Gabby, would you? Hey Ham, I'm looking for Gabby. Ah, the strong silent type. I like that.
Then we see the return of that of the bear, of Danny Faulkner's bear from Night at the Creation Museum, who references Night at the Museum and spurs Derek to flee in existential horror.
Dump, dump, run, run.
Derek manically jogs around the Ark encounter for a little while before coming across the worst exhibit in the entire attraction.
What is this, Groundhog Day? Sheesh! Gabrielle? Gabby? Gabby?
The Searching for Truth exhibit is basically just a big graphic novel that they've thrown up onto a bunch of walls, and you walk along and you read the graphic novel. And the graphic novel is about, like, some atheists who become Christian, and in a classic way, the only reason they weren't previously is because they didn't like God. They hated God because they had a loved one who died in some tragic way by, like, cancer or something. It's pretty emotionally manipulative, and then Tim Shaffey comes along, yes, and informs Derek of the door analogy.
You know, my mom believed all this. That's right, she did. She went through the narrow door that leads to eternal life. She placed her faith in Jesus Christ to save her from her sins. And he did. And now she's living with him for all eternity. No more sorrow, no more suffering, no more pain. Sadly, many people choose the broad door that leads to destruction.
I realize I'm being a little bit insensitive to this section, which is meant to be emotionally charged and has a lot to do with people's individual spirituality, but after seeing an entire movie with just a lot of what I consider to be intentional deception, I find it hard to be sympathetic at this point. Again, here is your annual reminder that I have nothing against theism, science affirming theism. It's mostly just the young earth creationism that I dislike, and the manipulation that we've seen here with the heartstrings kind of makes it worse.
Derek, you must decide.
I know. I know.
That was a good line performance by Derek, by Eric Hovind. Good job. So next we see two Eric Hovins, and they basically have a fight with each other in the inner mechanisms of Derek's mind, trying to decide whether they want to remain in accepting evolution or move over to the creationist side, and it's a lot.
Dude is right. We have got to get out of here. Out of here? But this makes so much sense. Sense? Will you listen to yourself? That's absurd. Absurd? Yeah. We were taught evolution in school by real scientists. These people believe Bible stories are real.
While it may be true that many children or high schoolers accept evolution simply because their teachers told them to, the reason why the vast majority of people across the globe accept evolution is because it is continuously affirmed. Predictions made in biology, in agriculture, in medicine come to fruition essentially nonstop and are responsible for many of the modern amenities that we enjoy and the cool knowledge that we get to peruse. Very few theories are as well founded as that in evolutionary theory.
Well, it sounds like they got a lot of science to back up their claims.
As we saw here, no, they do not, although they do have a lot of science that they can warp and misrepresent into making it look like they can support their claims.
So you think the vast majority of scientists are just lying to us? But don't you remember? It's all about the starting point. If you start with evolution, you believe the science backs up evolution. And if you start with creation, then the science will confirm the Bible. You know?
I like how evil Derek is like, listen man, are you trying to tell me this is some kind of really weird conspiracy? And then good Derek is like, ooh, crap, that does sound kind of crazy. And then he's like, oh, well, no, it's just some big misunderstanding. It's all about your starting point. It's just a series of dominoes that's gone back all the way to Darwin, and everyone's had the wool pulled over their eyes. Except It's not really about the starting point, is it? Because at any point, evolutionary theory can be falsified, and so can any of the fields that kind of corroborate with it, and then it corroborates, from things like geology to history to genetics, but none of that ever happens. Isn't that quite strange? Also, I think the biggest tick mark against this idea that starting points determine how you interpret evidence is that there is not a single young Earth creationist who isn't an evangelical young Earth creationist. There is not one kind of young Earth creationist that doesn't hold to some kind of Abrahamic religion, and one who has just come to it based solely on the evidence. If this was based off of starting points, right, then we should be able to find people all over the place who look at the evidence from an unbiased perspective and then come to the correct conclusion that the Earth is 6,000 years old and that evolution is dumb and silly. And yet, it's only ever those who are raised in the evangelical version of the church.
That sounds really philosophical and all, but I'm sticking with evolution. Are you kidding? What good has that done for us? We're blaming God for Mom's cancer, and that anger ruins every relationship we get into. Well,
science isn't about what good it does for you, it's about what is true. Although in the case of evolution, the good that it's done for you, again, has a lot to do with things like medicine and agriculture. Good Derek is right, though. We do see a massive influx of people accepting evolution after they've had a loved one pass away from cancer.
you do what you want. I want to have a little more fun before I go believing in God. I'm sorry, bro. You're not going to get that chance.
You just accept science because you want to sin. Thank you, Eric Hovind. Thank you, Answers in Genesis. What a lovely and well-proofed thesis statement. Feels a little feels over facts, doesn't it?
Wake up. Derek. Wake up. Derek.
Here, maybe this will work.
Yeah, try that.
I'm actually still not sure about where we're at with the whole was Gabby a ghost or not. It kind of seems like Gabby wasn't a ghost, but I kind of like the idea that she just is still a ghost. The Gabby that is flicking gross COVID hand water onto Derek's face is just still a ghost. Another fun headcanon is that Derek is just actually dead, that the flashlight bonked him on the noggin so hard that he just hemorrhaged on the ground, and actually he is just haunting the grounds of the Ark Encounter along with Gabby and the head apparition that is Tim Shavy, who I guess can move from the Ark Encounter to the Creation Museum at will. He's a high-powered ghost. Anyways, it's less fun than that. Derek goes to his car and calls his wife, and he's basically like, I'm a creationist now. Give me the number of your preacher.
Oh, man. What happened?
Do you remember anything?
Something hit me.
The flashlight?
Well, a flash of light. I gotta tell Sarah.
Wait, you might have a concussion.
Hey, Sarah. Wow. Okay, this last night I had was absolutely crazy. Hey, you know that guy you've been wanting me to talk to, that preacher guy? I want to talk to him. I need to get his number.
Okay.
So, I don't even know where to begin. Listen, everything that you've been trying to tell me, it's true. It's really true. I don't know, Sarah. I saw the light. I saw the light.
And that's it. The credits roll and we get another awesome postscript by the real Eric Hovind. Eric doesn't really say anything of note this time compared to the last time. It's a lot of stuff on how to be saved, the good-natured side of, Eric Hovind and the ministry. Then he shills a lot for his own website and like how to be a partner, as in someone who continually donates to Creation Today. And he ends with mentioning Dr. Menton. Menton was an anatomist who worked for Answers in Genesis for quite some time and also helped with Genesis Paradise Lost. Recently, he passed away, and I'm not going to cover his segment out of respect. I want that to stay as is. But as for the rest of Night at the Ark Encounter, atrocious. Not nearly as fun as the first one, and honestly the information was somehow even lower effort, which that was a really interesting bar to actually manage to go lower than. But that being said, my gentle and of course very modern apes, I do hope to see you next time. Take care of yourselves out there.